Why are you crying? You have a roof over your head. You have food on the table. What more do you want? If you're a millennial or Gen Z, there's a high chance you've heard some version of that sentence from your baby boomer father. It usually happens at your most vulnerable moment, when you try to talk about burnout, anxiety, or that quiet exhaustion you can't quite explain. You don't come to him for money. You don't come for a 5-step action plan. You come looking for something softer, a safe harbour, a listening ear. Maybe just one simple sentence. I understand. Instead, you hit a wall of pragmatism, a lecture about gratitude, a reminder of sacrifices made, or worse, a dismissive wave of the hand that makes your pain feel small. And in that moment, something subtle happens. You feel unseen, unheard, strangely alone in a house he worked so hard to provide. You might find yourself asking the same question over and over. Why is he like this? Why is it so hard for him to say, I love you, in a way I can actually feel? This isn't about blame. It's about understanding. Because if we want to bridge the generational divide before time quietly closes the window, we have to first understand the architecture of the man who built the house, but never learned how to build emotional shelter inside it. To understand your father, you have to travel back, before him, before the suburbs, before the steady paychecks, before the lectures about gratitude. The men who raised him belong to the silent generation and the greatest generation. Fathers shaped by the Great Depression and World War II. These were men who survived economic collapse, global conflict, and unimaginable loss. And when they came home, there was no language for trauma. No public conversation about PTSD. It was called shell shock. And the treatment was simple. You don't talk about it. You get a job. You provide. You move on. Emotional expression wasn't modelled. It was minimised. Vulnerability wasn't strength. It was risk. In developmental psychology, this is known as social learning theory, pioneered by Albert Bandura. The idea that children learn not through instruction, but through observation. So imagine your father as a boy in the 1950s. He watches a man who never cries, a man who carries the weight of war or poverty in silence, a man whose authority is absolute, and whose tenderness, if it exists, is rarely visible. That boy absorbs a script: men do not feel, men endure. By the time your father became a parent, he wasn't withholding emotion to be cruel. He was operating from the only blueprint he was ever given, one built on survival, not softness. Before he learned to provide, he learned to be silent. As your father grew into adulthood, America handed him a very clear definition of what it meant to be a good man. It was simple: provide. The post-war decades were the golden age of the American dream. A single income could buy a house. A steady job could secure a pension. Stability was attainable if you worked hard enough. And so a psychological contract was formed. If you keep the lights on, pay the mortgage, and put food on the table, you are a good father. Full stop. In this paradigm, love became measurable, tangible, practical. Love equaled resource allocation. When your boomer dad checked the oil in your car before a road trip, that was love. When he insisted on paying the restaurant bill, that was love. When he worked late, came home exhausted, and still fixed the leaking sink, that was love. But here's the tension. Millennials and Gen Z were raised in a different emotional climate. Therapy is normalized. Burnout has a name. Mental health is discussed openly. For younger generations, love sounds like validation. It sounds like I'm proud of you. It sounds like your feelings make sense. For him, love was sacrifice. For you, love is emotional presence. And when those two definitions collide, both sides feel misunderstood. To your father, your distress can feel like ingratitude, because in his internal map, he fulfilled his role. He built the house. He paid the bills. He did what society told him a good man does. What he was never taught was that emotional shelter requires a different kind of construction. And so he kept building in the only currency he trusted: provision. Here's the part that's hardest to accept. Your father may not be emotionally unwilling. He may be emotionally untrained. Emotional literacy, the ability to identify, name, and regulate feelings, is not instinctive. It's taught, modelled, practiced, and for many men born between 1946 and 1964, it simply wasn't part of the curriculum. Psychologists sometimes use the term alexithymia to describe difficulty identifying and describing emotions. It doesn't mean someone has no feelings. It means they struggle to translate internal sensations into words. Anxiety becomes stress, grief becomes fatigue, fear becomes irritation. On top of that, many boomer men developed what attachment theory would call avoidant tendencies. Vulnerability felt unsafe, independence felt safer, emotional intensity felt overwhelming, something to shut down rather than lean into. Now compare that to younger generations who grew up hearing words like trauma, boundaries, triggers, self-awareness. Emotional nuance became part of everyday language. Therapy became normalized. Feelings became discussable. So when you approach your father with carefully articulated emotions, I feel burnt out, I feel unseen, I feel overwhelmed, you may be speaking a dialect he never learned. It's not that he refuses to understand you, it's that your fluency highlights his limitation. And that gap between your emotional vocabulary and his emotional survival training can feel like a canyon. Not because there is no love, but because there was never a shared language to express it. You call him after a brutal breakup, or after a week where work feels unbearable. Your voice cracks. There's a pause on the other end of the line, and then it comes. Have you tried talking to your boss? Just get back out there. Make a plan. Within seconds, he's offering solutions, steps, strategies, logistics, and you feel it again, that quiet frustration. I don't need a plan. I need comfort. But here's what's happening beneath the surface. When you express intense emotion, your father likely experiences a spike of his own internal discomfort. Sadness feels chaotic. Anxiety feels unsolvable. Emotional pain has no clear endpoint. But a problem? A problem can be fixed. Psychologically, shifting into problem-solving mode restores control. It transforms something messy into something manageable. Instead of sitting in vulnerability, which may feel threatening or unfamiliar, he moves into action. For many boomer men, this reflex was reinforced for decades. Broken appliance? Fix it. Financial setback? Work harder. Flat tire? Replace it. Emotions, in that framework, become mechanical issues waiting for repair. So when he tries to fix your feelings, he isn't dismissing you on purpose. He's loving you the way he was trained to survive, by turning pain into a task. It just doesn't feel like love in the language you speak. On the surface, your father may look steady, grounded, unshaken. But beneath that calm exterior, many boomer men were shaped by decades of quiet, chronic anxiety. They grew up under the shadow of the Cold War, where nuclear annihilation was not science fiction, but a televised possibility. They came of age during the cultural upheaval and moral confusion surrounding the Vietnam War. The world felt unstable, authority felt fragile, the future felt uncertain. And in unstable times, rigidity can feel like safety. Add to that the immense pressure placed on men to succeed financially. Masculinity was measured by endurance, by stoicism, by the ability to absorb fear without showing it. Therapy was stigmatized. Depression was weakness. Anxiety was something you powered through. Over time, that unprocessed stress doesn't disappear. It calcifies. It becomes irritability, control, emotional distance. Now fast forward to retirement. The job ends, the title disappears, the paycheck slows, and suddenly the identity that anchored him for 40 years, provider, protector, problem solver, begins to wobble. For many boomer fathers, retirement isn't relief. It's an identity crisis. Without work, who am I? Without being needed financially, what is my value? That question can be terrifying. So when he clings tightly to routines, opinions, or authority within the family, it may not be about dominance. It may be about stability. Underneath the firm tone and practical advice is often something far more fragile. A man who was never taught how to sit with fear, only how to outrun it. At some point, you may have wondered, is he a narcissist? Maybe he makes your choices about him. Maybe your career path feels like a referendum on his success as a father. Maybe, when you set a boundary, he hears it as betrayal. It's important to be precise here. True narcissistic personality disorder is a clinical diagnosis marked by pervasive grandiosity, lack of empathy, and a deep need for admiration across contexts. Not every controlling or self-centered father meets that threshold. But many boomer fathers carry what psychologists sometimes call narcissistic wounds. If a man's entire identity was built on being the successful provider, the stable pillar, then his child's life becomes intertwined with his self-worth. Your achievements affirm him. Your struggles can feel like threats. Your unconventional choices may trigger something deeper than disagreement. This isn't always arrogance. Often it's fragility. When you quit a prestigious job to pursue something creative, he may panic, not because he despises your dream, but because instability activates his own unhealed fears about survival and status. If you choose a partner he doesn't understand, he may experience it as a loss of control. Psychologically, this can lead to projection. His unresolved insecurity gets placed onto you. His anxiety shows up as criticism. His fear shows up as rigidity. Understanding this does not mean excusing harmful behavior. Boundaries are still necessary. Accountability still matters, but it reframes the narrative. Instead of, he's trying to control me, the lens shifts to, he's trying to protect an identity that was never allowed to be vulnerable. And sometimes, what looks like narcissism is really an old wound defending itself. There is a kind of grief no one prepares you for. It's not the grief of losing a parent. It's the grief of realizing you may never have the parent you needed. At some point in adulthood, many millennials and Gen Z children reach a quiet, painful awareness. He may never say the words. He may never initiate the emotional conversation. He may never become the version of dad you imagined in your most vulnerable moments. And that realization hurts. Anger often comes first, frustration, distance. But beneath that anger is something softer, sadness. A mourning process for a relationship that feels incomplete. Psychologists sometimes call this ambiguous loss. The person is physically present, but emotionally unavailable in the way you longed for. You're not grieving a death. You're grieving a possibility. You might catch yourself thinking, why can't he just change? Why can't he meet me halfway? But growth requires tools, and he may not have been given them. Part of emotional maturity isn't just understanding your father's limitations, it's grieving them. Allowing yourself to feel the disappointment without turning it into bitterness. Because when you stop waiting for him to become someone else, something shifts. You begin to relate to him as he is, not as the fantasy version you hoped for. And strangely, in that acceptance, there can be a quieter kind of connection. Not perfect, not cinematic, but real. Understanding your father does not mean erasing yourself. Empathy is not the same as self-abandonment. One of the most powerful tools here is something psychologists call radical acceptance. Accepting reality as it is, without trying to force it into what you wish it were. Radical acceptance doesn't mean approving of harmful behavior. It means recognizing the limits of what is likely to change. If you're waiting for a cinematic apology, tears, long speeches, sudden emotional fluency, you may wait forever. But connection doesn't always require transformation. Sometimes it requires translation. Boomer fathers often open up more easily side by side than face to face. Drive together, fix something together, watch a game. Shared activity lowers emotional threat. When hands are busy, defenses soften. You can also validate his core identity strategically. Ask for practical advice. Acknowledge his sacrifices, not to inflate his ego, but to signal respect in the language he understands. At the same time, boundaries matter. You can say calmly, "I appreciate your advice. Right now, I just need you to listen." You can limit conversations that become critical or dismissive. You can protect your mental health without punishing him for his limitations. Bridging the divide is not about meeting him where he refuses to move. It's about meeting him where he is without leaving yourself behind. There's something we don't talk about enough. The baby boomer generation is aging. Hair turns grey. Doctor appointments become more frequent. The man who once felt immovable begins, slowly, to slow down. And whether your relationship is close, strained, or somewhere in between, time is moving. You may never get the perfectly worded apology. He may never become emotionally fluent in the way you wish, but there is still a window for smaller moments, for quieter understanding, for sitting in the same room without trying to win an argument that began decades ago. Breaking generational cycles doesn't always mean forcing the older generation to transform. Sometimes it means becoming the emotionally aware adult they never had the chance to be. It means recognizing that he gave you everything he had in his emotional wallet. It was just a different currency. If this video helped you see your father, or yourself, a little more clearly, you're not alone. Leave a comment and share your experience. These conversations matter. And if you want more deep dives into the quiet, complicated parts of the human heart, subscribe to the channel. We're building a space where understanding replaces resentment, one story at a time. Thank you for watching.